Yes, my name is Jonathan James. As your host for this podcast, we are excited to bring you some amazing information about people living with bleeding disorders, navigating chronic illness, and we hope that you enjoy this podcast. Welcome to the Hope Podcast. It's great to see you today. Thanks so much for joining us for this wonderful opportunity to be able to talk a little bit about family. We're getting ready to get geared up for our family education weekend soon, and I'm so excited about that. And today I thought it'd be a lot of fun to do an interview with my daughter, Hannah James. Hannah, it's great to see you at the Hope Podcast today. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because as we talk about families and family dynamics, I think it's important for us to be able to dive deep into some of the dynamics that happen within the context of family that, hemophilia affects everyone. It's not just one person. It's really about your tribe, right? It's about your crew. It's about your people. It's about what's going on at home. And so, there's a lot of different aspects that we could talk about. I think spouses is important. We're going to be talking about what it's like to deal with hemophilia as a sibling. We're going to talk about all kinds of aspects of that. But today I really wanted to focus. I asked you to come in and be a part of the podcast today to really focus in on what it's like as a daughter of someone living with hemophilia and growing up through all of the different aspects of life. And there's a lot to cover there. So right. I'm excited to have you in on the podcast today to talk a little bit more about being a daughter of a hemophiliac. I don't know if you know anybody like that or not.
Oh,
Do you know anybody?
No. I barely know anything.
Right. Well, so for people who are just tuning in, of course, I know you very well since the moment you were born, but but tell people a little bit about where you're from and how you've been involved in the hemophilia community, maybe even a little bit about your passion for the community, because you have your own passion for the community in a way that I think is developing and learning over time, but talk a little bit about what you're looking forward to with school and where you're at in life.
Yeah. I am from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was born in Mandeville. I've lived here all of my life, loved to travel and be involved, especially with the hemophilia community. I'm going to be going to college after a long and short gap year. I'll be going to college in the fall. I'm just really excited for everything that's moving forward. I'm glad that we're starting to get out of our country and our world where we were at for the last 2 years. I'm glad that everything's going to be moving forward. But I have been a part of the hemophilia community since the day that my dad was. I have been at the events. I have served, I have helped, I have volunteered, I've spoken at events. I've pretty much had a hand in every aspect of the hemophilia community at one point or another. Yeah. And now I'm kind of in a place where I'm able to help a lot more on the professional side for events and stuff like that. Personally, something that I'm stepping into now in my own vision for the hemophilia community is representing women with bleeding disorders and daughters of hemophiliacs, because there's not a lot. And because there's not a lot, the ones that exist don't really have a voice. Yeah. So that's really what I've been stepping into now. But outside of that, I'm just me, just a girl.
Just Hannah.
Just Hannah.
Well, you're 18. You're really at this stage of life where you're transitioning from kind of getting out on your own. I know you're starting a social media business where you're starting to do this for people, and I know you've been volunteering for Hope for years and doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff, helping us with our social media stuff as well. So you've been a huge help with all that. And I hope you continue to give the dad deal and give me the chipper chicken so that it can continue to help us. But I'm excited about you flourishing and being able to do this for other companies and businesses. And so that's pretty exciting to see that grow.
Yeah.
As well as going to college and getting geared up. You're looking at a degree in marketing, it sounds like. Mass communications, I believe, is kind of a focus. And so, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So I'm excited to see you're a great communicator. And, I think it's really good. But let's dive into some of the things about your journey, because I think that you have your it's interesting because, I think a lot of people have maybe heard my story, and I've shared my story a lot about how growing up with hemophilia looked and what it was like, and, all the different changes that we've seen. But something that I find that's been, eye-opening to me as a parent has been that, raising kids as a person living with hemophilia has also been, there was a time where I didn't think I was going to have kids. There was a time where I didn't think we could have kids. Even after we got married and started to explore that, I realized that we got a diagnosis with mom that said that we wouldn't be able to have children, and that was really tough. And so we really prayed a lot and believed and saw some real miracles there that didn't have anything to do with really hemophilia, but it was another whole set of hurdles. And so, but as a dad, it's been really interesting to kind of go through this whole thing of watching you on your journey of not just discovering life, but even as a child, playing doctor. I remember when you were itty bitty was totally different than maybe my friends' kids who were just like, hey, do you have a fever, Dad? And they'd put their hand. You were coming to me going, Daddy, do you have a tourniquet so I could give you your infusion? It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about what's your earliest memories of growing up with being aware that hemophilia was a thing in our home?
We didn't really have that conversation a lot. It really just had more to do with when something in particular would happen, when you would have a surgery, when something like that would happen. It would be like, oh, why is Daddy in the hospital again? Well, this is why. And I remember some of the earliest memories I have was one, which I don't really remember the timeline on either of these memories, which one came first, but two of the earliest memories I have came from one when you were in a wheelchair and you could only move your arm and you couldn't come to say goodnight to us because your wheelchair couldn't fit down the hallway. And that was a huge thing for me because that was tradition. And that was some of the things, not a lot stayed consistent in our life. And that was one of the things that stayed consistent. And when that wasn't happening anymore, that was like, oh, this is real kind of moment.
Wow.
The other memory I have is one of the times you came home. I think it was one of those ankle surgeries you had. You came home, you were laying on the couch, you couldn't stand up. And we were like, why can't Daddy stand up? That doesn't make any sense. And you said, look at my ankle. And you had these stitches on your ankle, and we were like touching the stitches.
That probably wasn't sanitary.
No, but I still remember that, like, so vividly. Like, and I remember visiting you in the hospital and, like, hating iodine. I hated iodine. I didn't like, every time I saw it, that orange stuff on anybody's skin, anytime anybody went in the hospital, but especially when you were in the hospital, I was like, oh, I never liked the sight of it. I knew what it was at all times, and it kind of brought back bad memories. But that was like something that I was still working through as a teenager. It was just the hate of iodine. But it's like all those little memories there. And I have really good memories too, where like memories where I knew you were hurting and like I knew you were in pain and you would run around the front yard and tackle the boys playing football. And when you had one arm in a cast or one arm in a sling and you were using the other hand to throw a football. And I remember when you started becoming ambidextrous because you had one or the other arm in a sling at all times. So it was more like watching you make do than thinking like, what if life is like that forever? Like it was more just like more of a reassurance that I knew that no matter what happened, we would make it.
Wow. Wow, yeah. It's you never know what's going on in your kids' heads, when you're going through all that. I know for me, like I had a lot of thoughts of just like I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. Like I just felt like I was, I mean, gosh, Mom encouraged me 1,000,000 times to
Yeah.
keep going and to keep staying engaged and keep being a dad and doing things with y'all that I it was weird because as a parent, you think like I feel like I can't be what either A, I thought I was going to be as a parent, or B, I can't be what everyone else thinks that I should be as a parent.
Right.
And so in either scenario, I don't feel like I'm living up to, I don't feel like I'm living up to my image, but I don't feel like I'm living up to everybody's. So there's a real temptation as a parent to kind of just go and say, well, I'm just not, I don't even want to go outside. Like, I don't even want to go and attempt to throw the ball with my left hand because I suck at that. So I'm not, I was right-handed. So, it was like, there's this one picture that we have of me and I think it's Isaac. I don't know. It might have been Ezra. I don't remember. But one of the boys, me building a bike stand, and I had my arm in a sling, a hat on backwards. He was sitting next to me. One of the boys was sitting next to me, and I'm drilling, and I'm holding like one thing in one hand, like with my kind of arm halfway in a sling. And Mom comes and takes a picture, and I was real big on, I did not want pictures. I didn't want documentation of me being, my limitations. But it was just like, which was silly. It was just insecurity.
Right.
But I didn't know, and so you never know what your kids are perceiving on the other end of that. Because for me, it was a big deal, but for you, here you are just watching it without bias, really, other than just seeing that it's dad dealing with his limitations and still being dad.
Right. And for anybody that's watching that is a father or a mom with hemophilia or any bleeding disorder that they feel like, or any medical disorder that they feel like is limiting them as a parent, your kids look at your personality and what you say and how you act way more than what you do.
That's good.
I remember like my fondest memories with my dad and with my mom, both of them being in and out of the hospital, were the silly moments where it didn't matter if my dad was in a recliner because he couldn't stand up. It was the joking around, and it was the talking about my day, and it was the snuggling late at night, and it was the knowledge that if I was having a nightmare, I could come talk to my parents. It had nothing to do with the physical limitations.
Wow. That's so good.
You would do goofy voices all the time. Seriously, you goofy voices. And I remember there was one time where we were just sitting and laughing in the living room and you couldn't stand up. You had both of your ankles like propped up and you couldn't stand. But you were laughing away and making funny noises and doing all your voice impressions. And I had no memory of the physical part of that. There was no part of me that didn't enjoy that moment because I was like, oh, well, he can't stand up. That has nothing to do with what we were doing.
Wow.
Has nothing to do with what made that moment fun.
Wow.
It was the personality. It was what you say. It is the way that you act. And I feel like a lot of people feel like what they do defines them and defines whether or not they're loved and defines whether or not they're a good person. And that's so not true. It's not true, especially if you're a parent.
Just the fact that you're there.
Yeah, the fact that you're there. Like,
wow. Yeah, and that came with a lot of encouragement from Mom because I was just like, oh my gosh, there was so many days I just wanted to just check out, and Mom was like, no, your kids need you, and just you being present and just being able to be goofy with them, So if you're dad and you're listening to this, do goofy voices.
And like a little bit more on a serious note, when you said with the pictures, you didn't want anybody to take any pictures. Those are some of my favorite pictures to look at.
Wow.
The ones the snuck pictures with you in a cast or whatever are some of my favorite pictures because it just reminds me that we can make it. And it reminds me of all the fun that I had in those moments. Like,
wow.
There are always fears that come with no matter what you do. Like, hemophilia is very hard. And bleeding disorders are very hard. And chronic illnesses are very hard. But they don't define you.
Yeah.
And for me as a daughter, going back and being able to look at those pictures, seeing pictures of him in a wheelchair, seeing pictures of him with a sling.
Him, you mean me?
Yeah, him, a random man that I don't.
Just because we're on the podcast doesn't mean I'm not still me.
With you, like being in the sling, being in a wheelchair, reminds me of good times. I have never once looked back at a picture like that and gone, What was hard was when you were like actually in the hospital. Those moments were hard, but even those I don't look back on and go like, like it's those moments are fun for me to look back at, and they're hopeful. They bring me hope in the things that feel small.
Wow. That's crazy because you don't think of it in the moment. You just think, oh, I'm so much less than. But it's, looking back, I know I've heard you talk about that a lot before, and so that's good. But talk a little bit about siblings because, a lot of people might know, have 4 kids, and so Hannah's the oldest. And, we could talk about just being the oldest all day long. Oldest people, children unite, because I was the oldest in my family. But tell us a little bit about as a sibling, you had a lot of little conversations that happened with the kids throughout their growing up too about what is just dealing with hemophilia. I don't think there probably was ever a moment where it's like, what is hemophilia? But it was more like, I hate it when this is going on, or I wish it was this way when that was going on, or why can't we just go skydiving, Dad? And you're like, well, because,
Right, yeah.
But so tell me a little bit about siblings. Like, what was it like just walking with your other siblings through all that, learning yourself, but then also helping them process?
Yeah. I think our story is unique in particular because I was the oldest and I was old enough to remember everything that happened while you were constantly in and out of the hospital during that big season. Mm-hmm. And the other kids weren't really old enough to remember all of that. Yeah. And pictures bring up a lot of that stuff now, but growing up, that wasn't really a big thing until it started getting to why can't we go to the water park for so much? Why can Dad not stand up? Why can't Dad participate in this? And there were a couple conversations of what was happening, where that was coming from. I think though more, and there were situations like that where we had a circumstance when you went to the hospital for a surgery, then came out of the hospital, and then 4 hours later, Mom was taken in an ambulance. And that was a huge ordeal for us anyway, because she was taken away in an ambulance, and then that's when I gave you your first infusion for the first time.
Yeah.
Because nobody else was there.
Yeah. I had just come out of having an elbow replacement surgery, and I had just come home from the hospital from having that surgery, and it was time for my infusion, and I was still so foggy from all the stuff. I'd been in the hospital for a few days, but then coming home, it was well, then we get home, and I wake up from this I'm still kind of trying to recover from anesthesia in a way, and I come kind of foggy awake to these people taking my wife out of the bedroom with out of an ambulance. She had a gallbladder ruptured and having to have emergency surgery. So I'm like, I can't go, and then I'm going, oh my gosh, what do we do? You didn't drive yet. No, so I call my parents
who 12.
Yeah, I call my parents who lived around the corner, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can you come go with Carly in the ambulance to go whatever and be there with her, because I can't get there, and it was just crazy. And so they all leave, and then all of a sudden I realize my elbow starts throbbing, and of course I had tried to move around and stuff, so it's just like really hurting. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, why am I hurting so bad? Oh my gosh, so bad. And all of a sudden I realized, like, oh my gosh, it's time for my infusion, post surgery infusion, which is incredibly important. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I can't give myself an infusion because that's my right arm to my left hand, my left arm. And then I think, oh, quick, I'll just call someone else that I know that can give me an infusion, which is my mom. So I'm like,
and your mom, Nana, had actually come. Was coming to give you the infusion.
oh, that's what it was.
She was coming to give you the infusion.
Okay.
Simultaneously, you were like stumbling out of your bedroom trying to like half carry mom while the ambulance pulled up.
It was crazy.
And Nana opens the door. She goes, "There's an ambulance outside," and everybody was so confused. And simultaneously, there's like 3 screaming children.
Right.
And
they were just
you're stumbling
freaking out because they didn't know what was going on.
Right. And you're like, and so Nana had come to give you your infusion, and you couldn't go to the hospital with mom.
Right.
So Nana follows the ambulance to the hospital with mom, and you're like, the person who came to give me my infusion is gone. So there was all this like,
crazy.
And then, I don't know. And then you were like, Hannah. And I know at the time, that was a big thing for you because you didn't like any of the kids to see you in any kind of vulnerable state or anything like that. When you were tired, when you were hurting, you were like, I'm going to go to sleep now. It was this like, we like shut that part of life out. And, so you were like, I need help taking my infusion. And that was, and also, just like for context, I am terrified of needles. Like, and I was 12. Like, I'm better now for the most part, but I was like very terrified of needles. And I was
you
like,
had an interest in medical things.
Yeah.
At the time, you were kind of talking like, I might want to be a doctor. And so I was like, quick,
Hannah
who can help me? Hannah wants to be a doctor. Maybe I can get her to help me. And it was this very, like, typical man over here didn't want to be vulnerable, but it really was like this, maybe we can do this together. And so I just talked you through it. Yeah. And I just said, okay, take this out of this box and da-da-da-da-da and do this with that. And here, okay, you see that purple dot, that scar tissue, just aim for that. And, and you did it and got it the first try. Yeah. And then that turned into like, this is pretty good. Like, let's just do this all the time. So then you gave me like every infusion like twice a day, I think for like 2 weeks or something. That was a long time.
Because mom couldn't do it after she got out of the hospital. Yeah. But like with all of that happening, like having the kids, like my siblings, Bella especially, was freaked out the most. Which I would have thought originally that would be Isaac. Just because he's the youngest. Yeah. But Bella was like torn to pieces.
Wow.
And I think the biggest thing that you having hemophilia built gave us a closer relationship. Like the siblings. Because in a lot of situations where you guys couldn't be fully present, we really bonded together, and we really just stuck together through a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And like my siblings are my best friends.
Wow.
And me and Bella were just having this conversation the other day, like no matter who I get into, no matter if a friendship's falling apart or if, whatever, family comes first.
Wow.
And me and Bella had this like instance the other day where I had kind of the option to please my friend or to please Bella and not hurt my relationship with Bella. And I chose Bella first, and we had this conversation. She was like, I wouldn't have been mad. I was like, no, but you would have been hurt. And she was like, yeah. And I said, no matter what happens, family comes first. Wow. And I don't think I would have had, I say this because I look at my peers around me in the world that we're in. People who are actually devoted to their family is very low. And you've got all the like, well, I've got this trauma and I have the, and like and people like completely detaching from their families, which in very specific circumstances can be healthy. But like, I look at the majority of people my age who are like hateful of their family. And I was just thinking, like, I really feel like because of the circumstances I grew up in, it built a way stronger connection with my family.
Wow. That's incredible. You never know, like, again, the pressure that you're under and the things that you go through. It's like, as a parent, you want to protect your kids. You want to shield them from all that. You want to hide them from all that, and you just don't know that sometimes the very thing that you're wanting to protect them from could be the thing that actually helps forge an even tighter bond.
Right.
That's really powerful, Hannah.
And we never know what the future looks like.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't have known at 6 years old that everybody around me would be detaching from their families. But I know that now. I wouldn't have had a different outcome if I was completely shielded from all that. If I was just thrown into the regular world and like shielded off from the reality of my life with my family, I would be a completely different person.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously you see the world through a different lens, but, you have had your own journey with hemophilia that is sort of unique. I think it's a part of the timeline in a way, is that, women with bleeding disorders for the most part has been, was not broadly accepted, when I was a child for sure. And even in the last, it's changed a whole lot in the last 10 years, but you've grown up through all of this. I mean, you remember going through times when the doctors were like, no, you can't possibly have hemophilia. It's like, just kind of brushed it off. But now you have a diagnosis, you're going through treatment, you're taking care of yourself in that way. And there was things like, even with dance, you danced a lot when you were little, and in ballet. I remember when you started getting into toe, especially, like, you would come home from practice and even your events and stuff, and it was like, the point. Did I say it wrong? Toe.
You said toe. It's
Sorry,
point.
whatever. Sorry, whatever it's called.
It's okay.
When you get
fine.
into like toes, hands, knees, toes. Anyway, but whenever
Shoulders, knees, and toes.
yeah,
That works.
It's a family conversation, right? But going through that though, I remember you would come home sometimes with your ankles would look just like mine. They were just as big as mine were, and it was like we would go, "Whoa, we have matching cankles." and so we were learning, and you were learning, and I think even the medical community was learning, and so come to find out later, you actually got the story goes that you had a pretty severe ankle injury, and I hesitate to say this, but it was at a Hope event. Go Dad. We were
waiting to see if you were going to say that.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, and it just so happened that it was down a inflatable, slide, and it was the perfect storm.
Fair, I was like way over the age limit for that slide, and I decided to go down it anyway when everyone else was like 4 or 5 years old.
Okay, so but also, to be fair, this was the situation. We'd rented this big slide for everybody to have fun, the kids to have fun, an inflatable slide to be at this event. And it was so much fun, and the kids had a blast with it. The whole event, everybody was safe. Like, there wasn't anything that went wrong the whole event. We had volunteers that were at the bottom and the top, and there were people making sure everybody was safe on it. And then we're tearing down. It's at the end of the event. Everything's over. We're tearing the whole event down, and we're packing boxes and loading trailers and doing all this stuff. And all of a sudden, I hear, Hannah's been hurt. And so I'm like, what? I'm on the other side of the thing, and I'm like, whatever, it's probably not that big of a deal. Well, anyway, then I see them carrying you out from the thing. And so what had actually happened was, you had decided at the end when everybody's going home, and it was my 4 kids, decide to go up to the top, and Isaac
It wasn't
sees you.
just us.
well, whatever. It was
like
mostly,
all the volunteers.
it was the volunteer kids.
It was the volunteers kid.
So y'all are all up at the top, and my youngest son, Isaac, she gets ready to slide, and right when you get ready to slide, Isaac comes and shoves you off, and you go sliding down kind of crooked, and you get your ankle caught in the side of this slide. Now, this is like a 30-foot slide. It's not like a small slide. Her ankle gets caught in the thing and twists it, and it's pretty bad. And she couldn't walk out of the facility. You literally
I flipped over the other side with my foot stuck in the slide.
Oh my God.
So like, you know how that, like there's the wall at the end of the slide and all those big slides. I slid down and then my foot goes in the crevice.
Yeah.
And then I flipped over.
Right.
And it stayed in there. So that was not fun.
So we end up carrying you out to the car and, of course, go get it checked out. And they think that it's a sprain or something and whatever. And so, but really long story short, we find out later that you actually have joint damage from what we believe was bleeding and microbleeding maybe that went on, festered on there for some time. But there was, we had scans done and stuff later on, and they said there was pitting in the cartilage and stuff that had actually had some deterioration in there, and some parts of it were kind of bone on bone areas. So, you've had your own journey of living with trying the discovery, and then of course coming to terms with it yourself, trying to learn how to self-infuse. And I'll just parent moment right here. I give props to all the parents out there, because I will tell you right now, and you were amazing, Hannah. Series, but I think, which one is harder, being the patient or being the parent? I totally think being the parent is way harder than being the patient, because when you're the patient, you grow up with it as a child and it's with you the whole time. When you're the child and it's your child, I mean, I'm like 100 times over, I'm like, let me just take the infusion, let me just get the shot, let me just do the thing, let me just overcome the needle for you. And anyway, we've had to learn how to do. You now do self infusions. You've had to learn how to do all of that, but you had to learn it as a teenager, not as an adolescent, and that has also presented its own set of challenges. So, talk a little bit about that part of the journey as far as your just own discovery and coming to terms with that and what that's felt like.
I was diagnosed right before I turned 18, and that was big because, especially as a girl in the hemophilia community, you grow up being told that you're crazy. Even when people believe you, the ultimate, like the decision makers that can make a change in your life for the better will tell you that you just need to go home and rest. And that something else is wrong. And that it's probably not that much. You're probably not in that much pain. And so when you grow up with bleeding disorder undiagnosed, alone, whether you're a boy or a girl, you go undiagnosed, especially having a parent in the bleeding disorder community, because you're watching them and you're going, I have all of those symptoms. Like, I know what this is. And then you get older and you start to adopt the, like, I'm crazy thing, where you're like, not so much as you agree with it because you know your pain, but you get used to that being the idea. Yeah. And then, I had gone back-to-back doctor's appointments where people said, no. And then I go to my now hematologist, and they said, well, there's this new test out. Like, let's do this other version of that. And, like, long story short, they're like, yeah, you have it. And then my next appointment, they take me in, they do an ultrasound of my joints, and they're like, you have the body of a 65-year-old woman at 18 years old. And that was huge for me. And so for the longest time, like, having hemophilia, I wouldn't tell people about it. Like, even if I knew it could save my life. And, like, it was just a very painful journey, to the point where I wouldn't even do prophy at all, which that's another thing. Being on a prophylaxis treatment regimen as a girl is huge. But, and I'm at the point now where I'm like looking back and counting all my blessings, but before I wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, why can't I get rid of this? But like, I wouldn't even do my prophylaxis because, shout out to Prophy Conference, last event that we did. If we have it again next year, are we gonna have it again next year?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Next year, you all need to go to Prophy. But well, I did. But I wouldn't even take my treatment, and so I wouldn't take my shots. I wouldn't do my infusions. I wouldn't. Like, people would say, okay, well, you're going to this thing. You need to rest today because you have a big thing tomorrow. I was like, no, I'll be fine. And then I can't walk for another 2 weeks. Like, it was...
People, as in Dad, would say, you're going to this thing. You got a lot of walking to do. You should probably take your treatment.
Right. And...
No, I got to...
You go through... It's like a mourning process. What is the 9 stages of grief? Like 5. I don't know.
There's 5 and then
there's an odd number of 5, 7, 9.
500 stages of grief. Depends on who you talk to. I'm on stage 499 of grief.
I've gone back and forth between 400 and 300 like 7 times. But you go through like all the stages, and you're in denial, and then you're angry, and then you've got like all of these things, and you're like, what? And then you're like in this loop before eventually you end up at acceptance.
Yeah.
And like, I think a stage that they kind of...
Even once you hit acceptance, you still go back to like,
right.
Do I really have to deal with it? I mean, like,
right.
Even once you have it, I mean, that's what they, you read a lot of psychology stuff always talks about how they're not sequential. They don't go in order. And then they also kind of repeat. Like that's why I'm on 499 is because there's only 5, but just keep going and they just keep repeating, but right. It's like this place of just going, no, I'm accepting. And now I'm still going back to like disbelief, because I'm like, ugh,
And I have moments of like fear, just like total fear. Of like, what would happen in this situation? What would happen in this situation? And like, especially as a girl, like not knowing what having kids would look like, because not a lot of women with hemophilia that are at least being treated for hemophilia have kids, and because of the world not really recognizing women with hemophilia, there's not a lot of studies on it. There's not a lot of doctors and hospitals that know what to do in certain situations. And so there's just a lot of like fear around situations like that.
Yeah, in some ways, arguably, it's even worse than it being a rare disease, just because it's a rare disease that had women with a hemophilia diagnosis were there's a lot of literature that still stands out there that says that women cannot have hemophilia. So,
right.
There's a lot of physicians. If you go to the emergency room, a physician with dealing with a severe hemophilia A guy like me, I'm going to go into the emergency room and they're going to go like, okay, at least they have an inkling that they should call a treatment center or they should call someone that has a specific thing that they need to work through. But with you go to the emergency room and they're going to, they look it up on Google or whatever they look it up on. Right. And it's going to go, it's, extremely rare, probably never, and so that's what they're going to come back in and repeat to you. It's probably never. And you could literally die on the table because
right.
You're not, it's in some ways, it's misinformation about something that's already rare.
Right.
That makes it even more dangerous, I think, than even just it being a rare disease.
I think I had a very unique example to look at growing up where like I have parents who didn't know that they had a child with hemophilia until way later, where my dad's parents, your parents, knew at birth. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, I'm grateful, though, that you had hemophilia. I can look at Nana and Papa. I can look at you guys and say like, these are, I have examples of what to do. And I'm within the hemophilia community to know that I have support as a parent, as a daughter, as a sibling, as whatever. As a patient, that I have support in all those directions. Right. So yes, I used to have fear. I used to be very scared of it. Not so much anymore. There's still moments where I'm like, I cannot believe that this is a reality I have to live with. Like, what the heck? Why? And then there are other days that I'm just glad I'm diagnosed.
Wow.
I would 100% rather be diagnosed and able to treat myself and able to plan ahead than look at my future not knowing what's happening to myself and then going, now I have a kid with hemophilia. Like, what do I do with this? And feeling lost. So I am far more grateful for where I stand now than where I could be.
That's really powerful, Hannah. That's really good. The journey that you've been on has been one that I sincerely wish that I could have, I wish things could have been different in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas. And like you said before, sometimes it's the struggle that forges you into a valuable, intimate, authentic relationship that's probably more powerful in some ways than just because of that pressure, if you allow it to forge you in that direction. But it does take, there are these tipping points, right, along the way that you hit, that you just go, I'm this way. And I think the biggest thing that I'm, remembering in this conversation is that, we've all had moments where we thought that it should be this way, or it should be that way, or I shouldn't do this, or I should do that. And the one thing that just keeps coming back to mind is that wherever you think you are right now is not the end, and don't make it the end. Get to that place where you can say, you know what, tomorrow's another day, whether it's a hardship or whether you're on a high. There's even a place where you can be like, yeah, just wish it could always be like this. And then the next day you have a bleed and you're like, I hate my life,
Right, yeah.
And so like, how you respond to that is important, to be present in it, but it's important to be you, fully you, and not to be, not to deny yourself the emotions of it, but also not to dwell on the hardship either,
right.
So much so that it causes you to get stuck in the mud of it being the hardship that you feel like you can't get out of. One last thing before we go, but is you've talked some about being connected to the community. You've had your own, you've kind of come into your own right of, you were a part of, I think it was the Believe Limited
the Hemophilia the musical.
Yeah.
I don't remember what year that was.
Several
2019?
years. Yeah, it was a while back. It was pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic. That's all we got to do.
Is it before or after the pandemic? But you've kind of been a part of a few things that not just Hope Charities related, but other things, and it's super beautiful to watch you get involved in women's conferences and just getting to be a part of the community, the broader sense of the community. But tell me a little bit about like what is your take on that, and do you encourage other people to get involved who might be listening to this thinking, gosh, my daughters don't want to have anything to do with this, but maybe they should be, or what would you say to people that might not know where their kids fit, or whether or not they themselves should be involved, even if their dads weren't? Because I know a lot of guys out there that they just don't get involved themselves, but maybe their kids might, if they were listening to this thinking, yeah, maybe I should, even if my dad doesn't.
Right. Being involved in the hemophilia community is going to be your best bet at a healthy life.
Wow.
Especially if you're the one with hemophilia. Wow. And I say that having tried both sides. Like, I tried doing that. I tried not being in the hemophilia community. For a while, I grew up around Hope events. That was just a big part of my like early adolescence and growing up years. there was a huge season where I was like, do not ask me to volunteer. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to come. I'm not going to volunteer. I don't want anything to do with that. Like, it has nothing to do with me. I can't relate. And then before I got diagnosed, not very long before, but a little bit before getting diagnosed, I was like, after a little bit of like in and out, where I was like, I'm in, I'm out, I'm not, I'm like the whole flow of life. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be in the hemophilia community. And if you're not actively involved in the hemophilia community, you need to be. And there's so many people who I think, I wake up almost every day being grateful for being involved in the hemophilia community and thinking of that. And I think of the people who are not involved, like imagining the people who live with hemophilia, who are trying to make it, and they have no one around them who understands and are not in the community. And also, I feel bad for people who have other issues that don't have a community like ours.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
Like, the hemophilia community is one of the most special groups of people I have ever seen in my whole life. I know people, like my dad's friends, your friends, mom's friends, people's friends, people on the board, advisory council, people from sponsors, like people who just come and host a table who are closer than family.
So good, Hannah. Oh my gosh, that's so good. I mean, I went through a season for sure where I didn't want to be a part of the community in the broader sense of the term when I was probably your age for sure.
Right.
But we've benefited from it so much, and just from the friendships and the relationships and the peers and the discussions. It's a lot of the hallway conversations. Sometimes it's the offline conversations that mean the most. And so, as you're still a teenager, so as a teenager, I have to ask you this question though. It's burning in my heart. Okay, what do you say to the teenagers out there who are like, but the sessions are so boring and I don't want to go and sit through all that?
The sessions can be boring. A lot of the sessions are boring.
Right.
I love being involved. I still do not go to certain sessions if I know that certain people are talking, because I know, or if it's about a certain topic, I'm like, it's not going to be fun. And with so many virtual events, oh my Lord Jesus, I hated so many of the virtual events. I just hated it. It's still beneficial. I think about, like, we had Profi conference. If you're like, okay, I know that my product is from this company, and this company is hosting a virtual session, and it might be boring, but they're going to have a lot of information that I need, go to the session. Take notes. Do something to keep your brain active while you're in that session.
That's good.
Like, and I know a lot of groups and a lot of organizations, they'll do like, if you were in so-and-so sessions, then you can get a prize. And like, as kind of like trying to get people involved. Ultimately, you have to be involved for your own good.
That's
like,
good.
You have to be involved. You have to sit in the sessions. You don't have to sit in every session. Don't feel like you're like, oh, I feel guilty if I don't go sit in such and such session. But pick a couple sessions. If you know that there's an event coming up and you're like, oh, I don't want to go to that session or whatever. Say there's 15 sessions over the entire weekend. Pick 3. Pick 3 sessions that you want to go to. And just, go, okay, I'm going to take notes in this session. I'm going to take notes in this session. And I'm just going to pick one to have fun in. And
you kind of got the raw end of that deal because you were volunteering a lot behind the scenes.
Right.
So you weren't eligible to win the prizes anyway.
Oh, dude, that sucks. We were talking about before Profi, we were like, oh yeah, I was thinking about this and this prize. And I was like, that is not fair. That is not, you're talking to me about this. I want these. That is not, that I would participate the most. That is not even fair. That is terrible. Not fair.
I know. I'm
Get
so
the
sorry.
garbage.
Y'all are going to be in therapy for the rest of your life. You're like, were your parents hard on you? Yeah, but what was like the worst part about your life? Was it the diagnosis? No.
It was the fact-
ineligibility for the prizes at the meeting.
And if you're a kid, you feel, and your parents are involved in the community, you feel so guilted into going to those stupid things, and you're watching so that so-and-so can get more views because your parents are involved, and they're like, but they need so many people to sign up. And so then you sign up, and then you're like, well, now I have to sit in the session. And they're like, well, even though you felt guilted into it, and even though you participated, and even though you actually had your camera on, and even though you were talking, you can't be eligible for any of the prizes because it doesn't matter if you're... That's like being told that you got all straight A's in school, and then you're not allowed to get scholarships or like anything to go to college. That's like it's wrong. It's so wrong.
Bad parent.
That's actually one of the reasons why I started going to other people when I was younger. I started going to other people's events.
Everybody else's event.
Because...
And not a Hope event.
No.
I need to be eligible to win some prizes.
I would go to Hope events, but I was like, I'm signing up for this event. And what are their prizes? Because I can't get Hope prizes. This is not fair. But...
I'm sorry.
If y'all are, if anybody's listening to this, y'all probably have seen me at like every event that Hope has had, but especially like some of the virtual ones. I've hosted some virtual exhibit halls and stuff like that, which is super fun. I've got to connect with a lot of the people in the community, which has been so fun. And so a lot of people have like seen me when I do a lot of the virtual exhibit hall stuff, and then like a sponsor will come on that I know. I'm like, hey, like it's like no, because I know them. But that is such a gratifying feeling when you know someone. Like I'm at the place now where I walk into a hemophilia event and I see a sea of faces that I know. And if I don't know somebody, I feel confident enough at this point to go up to somebody and be like, hey, I've never met you before. I'm a veteran here. Like, what? I'm a veteran in this community.
I'm a fixture. I'm part of the furniture.
I'm part of the furniture here. You'll pretty much find me anywhere. It's like, and it's like, I feel confident to where I can go introduce myself to people, and I can do a session, I can speak, I can do a whatever, and feel confident because I'm involved, and because it it started with doing it for my own good, and then I did it because I wanted to after that.
Well, that's one of the things I'm excited about with Family Education Weekend coming up.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing some game nights. We're doing some fun stuff.
Okay, y'all, that is not... I can't even say I'm excited. I am super excited for Family Education Weekend. Yeah. It's also not fair because I still can't
win any of the prizes.
I digress. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it because...
Okay. I'm sorry. I will try to find... I might not be able to afford the prizes, but I will try to find for just y'all. But I will be able to... I promise you that I'll do my best to afford counseling.
Oh my gosh.
So the thing about what I hear you saying, which I think is interesting, is that even when it's virtual, because I hear a lot of people say, well, it's not in person, I don't want to go. But there is a value. And look, I mean, granted, there's a limitation to it too. But I have stayed connected to people that are halfway across the world.
Right, exactly.
Through this pandemic that, oh my gosh, like I don't want to lose that. I want to stay in contact with them. I want to be able to, and I probably, as it's like a reunion, like a family reunion, I have these great intentions of wanting to go see my cousins and talk to my family and keep in contact with them and whatever. And it's like, we have a cousin that's relatively well-known musician. And it's like, I'm not called him or talked to him or texted him just because I'm like, well, he's probably busy,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, just things like that. You just go, oh my gosh. Like getting involved in an event is a good thing. Even if you can't win the prizes, there's still value in it.
Right.
And look, and I would say too, like we try really hard to try to keep, sessions entertaining and engaging whenever possible. And to each his own. Some people, I will never forget the first time I ever got to go to a World Hemophilia Federation meeting. If you ever get the chance to go, oh my gosh, you should go. Okay, it was the best thing ever. But I don't speak physician. And so I go to this first session, and I am so excited. And there was a new therapy coming out. It was still in trials, and it was all going to be like, oh, this is the latest, greatest technology, and da-da-da-da-da. And we go in the session, and there's legit, like 2,000 physicians are in this room. This is a huge room full of people.
Wow.
I'm in this thing, and I'm sitting on the front row. I got my notepad, and I'm all like, yes, I'm here. I'm in it. I'm so excited. I'm ready to take notes. And even worse, a friend of mine who's a physician was speaking in this session.
Oh,
I mean, not worse because he's amazing, but he gets ready to speak and he gets up to talk, and the man spoke words I have never heard before or since, and it sounded like Chinese to me. I mean, I was so foreign, and I like the guy, and we hang out, but I'm like, I don't know what to write on my paper. Like, I have a paper, and about after like an hour and a half,
the paper.
I'm really trying. And after about an hour and a half of this going on of Chinese, and I'm like, I know he's English, like speaks English, and I can't understand. But I mean, like after about an hour and a half of this, I'm going, I'm having a hard time not falling asleep. It is the most boring thing I've ever been in. But these physicians are living it up. Like, he's just like, they're speaking his language. And so, it is an important thing that even if the information is incredibly amazing, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because the speaking is not speaking to, is not engaging to you doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. But, it is important to still try to put yourself in those situations sometimes just so that you can learn. I actually did, believe it or not. I mean, it was only one little thing, but I did learn something that and that memory for me was actually something that I really look back on still and go, man, I'm so thankful I didn't miss out on that. Yeah. And I got a lot out of the whole conference. It was just that one session that really was like, I'm not going to probably go to another one of those. I mean, I love you as my friend, but I'm probably not going to do that again.
I also, just to point this out, I've done the boring sessions in real life, and I've done them on virtual. Yeah. Virtual is like way better because I say this, especially for the boring ones, because if you're doing...
You can play Tetris on the side while you're...
No. No, okay. But it's one thing if you're sitting in the session and y'all, it's so bad when you're the daughter of the guy in charge and...
You have an obligation.
You have an obligation. But they know who you are. And if you're sitting on the front row, which I've done, big mistake... Where you're like, and y'all, I have like big time ADD. And so I'm sitting there and it's awful when you're like, I'm trying to pay attention and you're like zoning out. And you're like, I can't focus and I want to focus so bad and I can't do it. But it's different. And you're like sitting in this like straight chair and you're like you're folding your hands. You're like, this isn't real life. And I'm being very serious right now. But if you're in a virtual session, and I keep my camera on, I'm talking, but y'all can get a Dr. Pepper, you can get a snack, you can get a blanket, you could just chill in your bed and be in that session. And it is so much easier to focus. If y'all have any questions, especially teenagers, if you guys have any questions, if you have anything you want to ask, I also have a podcast, but if you guys have any questions, you can find me on Instagram. If you go to Hope's page on Instagram, they're following both of my accounts. So you can just go on there and find me super easy. So you're not like, who's this one? I don't know.
There's layers of your story that will continue to unfold. And I'm super excited about the future. And just, I just want to say too, that I sincerely, one of the things I love and adore about you is how much that you have continued to return. I have seen you over and over again get up to bat and feel like you've been defeated, and you have been honest with yourself. You've been honest with us. You've been transparent with us as your parents to say, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm going through. And, and I've watched you just get back up again. I really feel like that probably the greatest strength of anyone is their ability to return to the fight when the fight gets hard. And I've watched you do that over and over and over and over again. You've had your fair share of battles to overcome, not just the ones we talked about today, but a lot of other ones. And I think it's just, I'm just inspired by your courage, and I see a lot of your mama in you, and I'm glad to see that you're engaged in the community. Certainly, one of the things that I'd hoped was that we wouldn't be defined by hemophilia, but that we would be able to contribute to defining hemophilia. And I feel like that's one of the things that we've been able to accomplish as a family and continue to work on as a family. I believe that's our legacy. So thanks so much for being here and being a part of this conversation today. And I look forward to seeing you volunteering at the next one, ineligible and all. See you in the next one.
Bye.